Hello again. Uh, this is the second video I'm going to make in my series of some tips on how to make your own cutting boards. I feel these are essential to knowing how to make a good one. It's kind of a learning process as you go through and you make quite a few. You're not going to hit it perfectly right off the bat on your very first one, but I'm hoping that these videos can help at least get you closer to it. This video is going to be on sanding. So what I want to talk about is once you've taken your slab, because that's all this really is just a slab. Once you've taken it through your planer, your thickness planer, or you've flattened it yourself on a router sled, however you want to go about it, your planer inevitably is going to leave lines, and these are nicks that you have in your blades on your planer. And the thing about sanding, especially on end grain, edge grain is not so bad. If you have lines, it's pretty easy to get it out. But if you're going to make an end grain cutting board like this, end grain is very, very tough to sand. So to get rid of these lines, sometimes what I did in the past was I would take my orbital sander here and I would kind of just try and dig in on those lines and see if I can get them to go away. Well, the problem with doing that is you end up with a groove pretty much. You can feel it with your hand if you do that. And I would try to go at it this way and just kind of go around. Sometimes that helps, but if you really want a quality cutting board, maybe you're giving it for a gift or something like that, you really want it to be flat. The very first step, most of us just want to jump straight into sanding, but the very first thing that I do, especially if the lines are pretty bad, is this right here. You want to raise your grain on your slab before you sand. So the reason you want to do that is because now that you've cut all these pieces, you know, they're individual, but once you've cut, all these pieces have been freshly cut, the first sign of liquid that you put on this, those fibers are going to expand out. You don't want that. Or you want to take care of it beforehand with some alcohol. Now you can use denatured alcohol. Some people even use water. I try to stay away from water because water is pretty much the enemy of cutting boards. It can penetrate and just make everything swell. The benefit of doing this is it dissipates a lot quicker than water does. I tend to use a higher percentage, even more than 70%. I try to use at least a 90% alcohol. This is all I have on hand right now. But you can get it anywhere. I mean, Walgreens, Walmart, I think even Home Depot. Home Depot sells denatured alcohol. You know, wherever you're shopping, you can pretty much find alcohol. So what you want to do is just put a healthy dose of it on there. I'm not going to do it because I've already done it on here, and I wanted to get through this video and show you what to do after that. But so you soak your board in it. You just pour some on top, spread it out with a paper towel or your hand or whatever, you know, if you don't have any paper cuts, and let it dry. You want to do both sides. And what I usually do is I have a couple of supports underneath. You can use whatever. I just use scrap pieces of wood. So you do one side, flip it over, do the other side, and I walk away for about an hour. And this allows the air to get underneath it and it'll dry. And sometimes you'll see when you do the first side, when you put alcohol on here and you flip it over, you'll already see some seeping through. That's okay. It does mean that it's porous. Now wood it's organic and it's porous in nature. Some woods are more porous than others. That's why you want to stay away from things like red oak and most oaks in general. But red oak. But you can see, like right here on this piece of cherry, this is some pith in the cherry. That's going to have a little bit of travel through the board, and you can take care of that at the end of the road when you're sealing everything. When you're putting your oils on here, you can actually finish it with a beeswax, and that would actually seal all the pores. And that goes for any gaps that you might have in your glue lines and things like that too. But this is a very important step in the sanding process. Now, when you're sanding, you want, if you're going to use a belt sander, I'd stay away from belt sanders unless you have a really big slab. It's kind of the only tool that you have for that. I use an orbital with a filter on it. This I find, if you just barely just hold your hand on it on top, just like that, and just let it go on its own and go as slow as you can. This board you want to spend about, I would say on this side, you want to take about probably 3 minutes. You know, you want to go real slow, about that pace right there. And so I'll start with an 80 grit, you know, something pretty coarse, because once you've raised the grain, it's actually going to be easier to get these lines out because the grain is raised and it's all exposed, if you will. It's just sticking up in the air, and that 80 grit sandpaper is just going to knock most of it right off, especially if you go slow with very little pressure, because the object here is to keep it as flat as possible. Because the first thing that somebody's going to do when you hand them a cutting board is this right here. Oh, that's so nice, is what they're going to say. Or they'll say, oh, thank you, because they don't want to be rude at how bumpy your cutting board is. And the danger of a cutting board that has a bunch of divots in it, like a golf course, is they can puddle up and they won't dry as fast. And that actually, you want your board to be as flat as possible so that it will dry at an even rate, and so you won't get any water penetration into the board itself. You want to keep that to a minimum for sure. But sanding, sometimes I'll raise the grain twice. It really just depends. Like if you just test it a second time, what I would do is raise the grain with your alcohol, sand it with your coarse grit and get these lines out. And then I would actually go back with a semi-wet paper towel and go back and just spread some more alcohol on it and see if it raises the grain again. Because what's going to happen if you don't get the grain completely stable, because that's the problem, is that the grain is not stable, and that's why it's raising and it's just coming up into the air. So the problem is it's not stable, so you're trying to stabilize it so that when you put your finish coat on it, your mineral oil, your beeswax, your conditioners, things like that, when you put that on there, you want it to be as smooth as possible. And if you haven't raised the grain all the way, when you do put the oil on there, it's going to raise the grain again. I learned that early on. I had to redo a couple of boards, and I'm glad I learned that. But I wanted to share this as a tip for you guys because I find it helpful just to get through the process. You don't want to rush through it. Like, you're looking at this beautiful slab and you just want to hurry up and sand it and put some oil on it because you want to see the color change, because the colors do change. It's going to end up looking like that. And you want to see that real quick. If you're anything like me, I want to hurry up and get to that point. But don't rush it. Take your time. Try to raise it twice. If you find that routinely the second time of trying to raise the grain, it really doesn't do anything, just skip the second time. But you definitely want to do it once at least. And that will the benefit of that is it helps you get these lines out without having to dig in, and it also gives you a smooth, flat surface after you put the oil on. So I hope you find that helpful. If you have any questions, reach out in the comments below. And thanks for watching.